Throughout history, there have always been those who seek to rise by shaping perception, men who recognize the fears and wonders within the human heart and use them for their own gain. In moments of uncertainty, when people search for meaning, such individuals may step forward, not to guide toward truth, but to elevate themselves. Their words shift with circumstance, and their message bends toward their own interests rather than toward what is eternal and true. One striking example of this can be found in history. In 1504, during his fourth voyage, Christopher Columbus and his crew were stranded on the island of Jamaica. At first, the local inhabitants provided them with food, but when supplies became scarce, the support came to an end. Facing desperation, Columbus turned to his knowledge of astronomy. He knew that a lunar eclipse was approaching. Seizing the moment, he warned the people that if they refused to help him, his god would darken the moon as a sign of displeasure. When the eclipse began, the sky darkened just as he had predicted. The frightened inhabitants, believing this to be a divine sign, quickly resumed supplying Columbus and his crew with food. In this way, a natural phenomenon was used to instill fear and secure personal gain. Another example of this deception is that of Paul. Long after Jesus had been taken up into heaven, Paul appeared on the scene. Historians often regard him as the figure who shaped Christianity and spread it among non-Jewish communities. He appointed himself an apostle, despite the fact that some apostles originally chosen by Jesus were critical of his role and teachings. Paul's interpretations and letters later became an important part of Christian doctrine, giving him a central role in the faith. Somewhat separate from the direct teachings of Jesus, he claimed to have seen Jesus in a vision on the road to Damascus. However, historical sources show that he recounted 3 different versions of the same vision, each with different details, meaning that the accounts do not fully correspond. Paul also said, "To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those who were under the law I became like a law enforcement officer. To those who were not under the law I became like a law enforcement officer. I became all things to everyone, to save some in every possible way." He adapted his behavior and message to different target groups to maximize his influence in the spread of Christianity. This strategy, changing one's message or behavior to please different target groups, is characteristic of a deceiver seeking influence or profit. However, Jesus and all his predecessors never used such tactics. He spoke openly and directly and invited everyone to the truth, without manipulation or opportunism. He remained consistent and always pointed to God as the highest authority. In 1 Corinthians 9:14, Paul writes that those who preach the gospel must be provided for in their livelihood. He accepted gifts from the communities he served, such as food, clothing, and financial support. Critics have sometimes cited this as a form of opportunism, especially in combination with his strategic adjustments to different target groups. As he said, "I have become everything to everyone." An opportunist is someone who adapts his words, deeds, or beliefs to gain personal advantage, such as wealth, status, or power, often without regard for honesty or principles. Paul often used in his letters I, me, and mine, describing himself as a spiritual father to his followers, thereby taking a personal position of authority. Historians sometimes see this as egocentric or hierarchical, exactly what Jesus had warned against. "Call no one on earth your father, for only God is the ultimate father." Jesus always emphasized God as the highest authority. In the Gospels, he never refers to himself as I to claim power or title. He uses I only in service to God. He taught that people have only one Father God and stressed humility, obedience, and devotion. The difference is clear. Jesus always pointed to God and never elevated himself, while Paul took a personal role and authority, positioning himself as a guide and using terms like my children or my community, which Jesus never did. But there was also a man in whose time an eclipse of the sun occurred, yet he did not turn it to his own gain, though he could have done so. At the time when his young son passed away, a similar eclipse occurred during his lifetime. Many were startled and immediately sought to link this natural phenomenon to the child's death. If he had considered wealth or social status important, he could have seized this opportunity and won the trust of the people, but he did not accept their words. Instead, he said, "The sun and the moon are signs of God. They are not eclipsed because of the death or life of a man. So when you see them, turn to God in prayer and remembrance, and call upon him until the darkness is over." Yet some people portray him as a deceiver, despite his integrity and refusal to exploit even the darkest of omens for personal gain. When we move beyond assumptions and examine his life closely, a very different picture begins to emerge. Not a man seeking power or influence, but one who consistently chose truth even in moments where falsehood could have brought him advantage. Moreover, many saw it as a divine sign regarding the death of his son Ibrahim, peace and blessings be upon him, so there was no need to confirm it further. But the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, did the opposite. He pointed out the truth to the people, that the sun and the moon are signs of Allah and are not connected to the life or death of an individual. In doing so, he demonstrated his sincerity and integrity. Even in moments of intense personal grief, he was not guided by self-interest, fear, or deception, but by the truth and the will of Allah. If you enjoyed this content, Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might find it valuable.